Hello, Molly. I'm so excited to have you here. It has been a pleasure to get to know you in our time at Zuzalu in Montenegro and to really witness and see the amazing journey that you've been on as the head of engineering, product, and research at Protocol Labs, which we'll dive into what that all means. But basically, the veterans and creators of IPFS, which is basically all like the peer-to-peer network for protocol design and making everything more safe and open, but also has just built a mass number of different projects in this space, which I think are really interesting. I can't wait to dive in, including Filecoin network, which is a file storage solution on chain. So there's so much to dive into there, but you also have an incredible background, both at Stanford, but then at Google. So you've taken this like sort of really traditional or original internet world and then like moved into the future of internet or the future of blockchain. So I can't wait to dive in. Can you kick us off with first just where are you calling in from, or where are you based these days, and what is your primary focus?
Oh my gosh, to choose a single focus. First, thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to chat today. I'm calling in from Reykjavik, Iceland, which actually is one of my home bases. I move around a lot to lots of different events. I spend a chunk of time in Seattle, chunk of time here in Iceland, and a lot of time just wherever the community is meeting up to discuss how to make all of these open source protocols better. And we are currently having what is the second PhilDev Summit. We had the first one 2 weeks ago, and this is the one for all of our Europe and North America community members. And we're deep in design discussions about how to make the Filecoin network and ecosystem better, improvements to tooling, improvements to core protocol. It's been awesome. We're hanging out in the Harpa, which is this like beautiful concert hall, having these like deep technical discussions about like, how to scale the network or how to improve this or that part of the protocol. So it's been fantastic so far. Definitely one of my focuses for the past month has been helping make this venue exist and plan the events, bring the community together here. But I also spend a ton of my time on, just talking about core protocol improvements, working with engineering managers and dev teams from, many different entities, many different time zones around the world to, think about how we are improving Filecoin, how we're improving IPFS, how we're improving libp2p, which is the networking layer that underlies Filecoin, IPFS, Ethereum, Polkadot, Polygon, lots of other networks. And generally having that conversation with engineers, with product managers, with researchers about what's the biggest pain point or the biggest problems that people are experiencing as they're applying Web3 to more use cases, as we're trying to onboard and cross the chasm with the sort of infrastructure that we've been building. A lot of like IPFS, Filecoin are focused on kind of that core file storage and addressing data on the internet, building decentralized applications, having local first access to your data and being able to collaborate peer-to-peer around something like, a document or making sure you can maintain access to your NFTs regardless of, without having to trust other parties in the ecosystem. And so, a lot of it is like building these core primitives, making them more accessible, more useful, and building additional kind of like layers on top of the foundation so that they have less switching costs. They can be used by people who, don't want to open up a command line and start, interfacing with a terminal on their machine. They just want to load a website and get off and running. And so a lot of my time right now is spread between the Filecoin virtual machine, which just had its 6-month anniversary of going live in the Filecoin network. It's fully EVM compatible. And so there's a lot of people who have been building smart contracts on top of that. DeFi was a big area. They've helped a lot in the access between token holders and storage providers in the Filecoin ecosystem. Storage providers are the ones who are doing all of that large scale data storage, and they need access to collateral to secure the storage that they're onboarding. And so solved a big pain point there. I spend a lot of my time on this thing called Interplanetary consensus, which is a scaling solution for Filecoin and other ecosystems so that we can build compute chains and data availability chains and retrieval chains and scale Filecoin storage itself so that we could have regional based storage. We could have North America, Europe, Asia, each having their own data onboarding chain. So we could bring even more data to the Filecoin ecosystem faster. We're already at 1.5 exabytes, which like I thought was, I really thought it was going to take us a lot longer to get to 1.5 exabytes, because like that's huge. That's like so much data. But the world is creating data on like such an increasing pace that like, you know, especially with generative AI and all of the data sets that those algorithms are being trained over and that are being fed in to keep those sorts of algorithms, you know, tuned and fresh and able to create new content, and the data generated by those sorts of generative AI. It's like there's a lot of potential there to scale our infrastructure at utilizing a decentralized network to be able to scale faster than some of the kind of like more centralized ecosystems. And so I spend a chunk of my time on IPC, which is all around scalability. And then I also, you know, spend a chunk of my time on just like core like network implementations. We have 3 different implementations in Filecoin land. And so I spend a chunk of my time, you know, in the core devs community, helping those groups plan network upgrades and decide what new improvements and features to implement. So I'd say a lot of my time is more Filecoin focused, but my background, I actually joined the project as the product manager for IPFS. So I took my product background from Google and jumped in headfirst into the first IPFS implementation, Go IPFS, which is now called Kubo. And so that's also a place that's very near and dear to my heart, is trying to make the whole web work peer-to-peer in that domain. And so have been helping here and there, though I spend a little bit less of my time on IPFS these days, just helping new implementations get started, differentiate, set their own roadmaps for how they're going to kind of like increase access or help people build websites or applications on top of IPFS.
I love it. It's such a broad space. And I'm so curious, how did you even get into this world? Like, how do you go from Google search, right? Like really traditional, but like also so exciting, lots of big problems to solve there. Like, how did you even hear about this IPFS project to even jump in?
Yeah. So I've actually known about IPFS since about the time the project was started. I knew nothing about blockchain. I'd never heard of blockchain in my life, but I attended, I think, the first Stanford seminar that Juan Benet did on IPFS. It was, you know, one of the seminar tracks, and you know, was listening to that, and I was like, yeah, I mean, this is how the internet should work. Like, this would be more efficient. Users would be more in control of their data. Like, this makes sense. And I was a product manager. I just started at Google. I was actually on the Chrome team when I first joined Google, working on Portable Native Client, which is the precursor to WebAssembly, which is, you know, now super possible or popular around the world. And we use it ourselves for the FEM is all WASM based. And so that's where I first learned about IPFS. And it was one of those like, cool, that makes a lot of sense. That's like an ambitious quest. And, you know, knew Juan from Stanford, knew some of the people who started getting involved in the IPFS community back then, but personally was very focused on, you know, learning how to be a very effective product manager. I made the leap from Chrome into doing Google Apps for Education. So if you've ever heard of Google Classroom, which teachers and students use to do, you know, a lot of their in-class and out-of-class coordination these days. And, you know, that was like my passion area, and where I was like super excited to be on the team from like before Classroom existed to like launching it, building the native apps, and kind of like scaling that there, and going that 0 to 1 process kind of opened my eyes of like how quickly you can, you know, make something that can have a profound impact on people's lives and what's possible for them. That was really exciting. And then making the jump to search was the change from like, okay, you know, we're building a new thing that solves a problem for people, versus we're refining something very large that touches hundreds of millions of people every day. And, you know, I was rolling out new search pages that literally touched, I think it was 200, 300 million people per day were interacting with like the new pages that I was designing. but it felt like an incremental change. And so at that time, I'd been kind of like open source here and there, contributing to the IPFS project where I could add value. I was involved in some of the early, hey, how are we going to roadmap our work for the next couple of quarters? I'd gotten to hang out with the team at a couple of different team weeks, just contributing where I could. And now after 5 years at Google, I was like, I'm really excited about doing something that's ambitious, that's 0 to 1 in the internet capabilities and the way the fabric of the internet causes all of the applications above it to be built and designed. And if we can make some fundamental changes to that foundation, we can vastly impact the trajectory of the future and the capabilities individuals like all of us can expect from the tools we rely on every day. So I wanted to go one layer deeper, wanted to do something really ambitious, had loved working as a part of this open source community and loved kind of the openness of Web3, of just like anyone can lean in and start helping out, start contributing. And the open source part of it was super exciting to me. And so I took a leap, left Google, jumped in, and initially I was like, hey, I'm going to try this out for a while and we'll see whether I can help, whether I can add value here. And within 6 months, I was like acting as project lead for the IPFS community. And so it was like a very fast, like, okay, and go. Let's just start paying attention to how everyone is using this and helping get that information to all of the people who are building improvements to it. And so it really just scaled up from there. I mean, I came in on very much the ground floor of the IPFS project, and it's been a roller coaster 5 years since then, going from IPFS Kubo land to leading the IPFS project to helping lead the launch of the Filecoin network, and now getting to lead all of this amazing engineering and research work.
It's such a huge amount that you guys have built. It's incredible. And it really is an ambitious project, right? Like the IPFS stands for Interplanetary File System, which already in itself sounds ambitious. So maybe if you could just quickly explain in like one sentence to people who may not be as familiar, like what is IPFS and what is Filecoin as a network? And how does that compare to maybe something that people might be familiar with, like cloud storage or like AWS, for example?
Totally. Yeah, so IPFS, the Interplanetary File System, is actually a GCR Licklider homage who talked about the intergalactic networks back in, I don't actually remember, 1970s maybe. But it's definitely trying to build a file system in a way that we address and share and rely on data that can scale to, at least interplanetary civilizations. Maybe someday we'll have like inter-solar system civilizations as well. But at the very least, when we have, light speed constraints on how fast we can load data from another planet or another source, we really want to be building a network that can rely on local copies of the same data, and you address data by the content, what it is, instead of, I have to go to this machine on Earth in this particular region in order to fetch that data. That's like the location addressing paradigm that's super common, what we use HTTP today. IPFS kind of flips it on its head and is like, hey, we're going to address everything by the content hash, by the digital fingerprint of what the file is, and then anyone can give it to you and you can verify that it's the content that you were asking for. And IPFS builds a number of kind of tools around when you add data to IPFS, it automatically fingerprints all the data and creates data models around how to content address different types of data. It has capabilities around fetching and retrieving data by its content ID. And it has, a file system that you can utilize if you're, just wanting to load in your photos or documents or other things, whereby you can then fetch things, from kind of like that normal file system interface. Filecoin adds an additional layer beyond IPFS, which allows you to offload this content address storage to other parties in the network and rely on them to keep your data around. Because one of the challenges when you move to a peer-to-peer world is I could load something into my local IPFS node. I could send you that content ID, the CID for my data. And then if my node goes offline, you can't fetch it because I'm not providing that content into the network anymore. And so many groups want to offload the responsibility for keeping that storage around to other parties so that if their local machine is doing something else or not available or gets lost, that you have many parties redundantly storing and serving the content you care about. And Filecoin has that incentive system for paying other parties to do that storage for you. This actually happened organically in the IPFS ecosystem. Pinning services emerged, like Pinata and a number of others that like you could pay them in fiat to pin your data and serve it to other people later on over HTTP or BitSwap, any different way of fetching your data that you wanted. And with Filecoin, you can now pay a decentralized marketplace of storage providers, and the network itself both helps you identify all of the different groups who could potentially take that storage and store it for you in an ongoing way. And you don't have to have like a trust relationship with that particular individual in that decentralized network, like maybe you do right now with AWS, where you give them your data and you trust that they're going to keep it online for you. And you trust that because they're a large institution and name brand. In Filecoin, there are actually decentralized proofs that are happening every single day that verify that individual, that node in the network is storing your data correctly, and it checks and verifies that over time, so you don't have to trust that storage provider. And it's a marketplace so that you can choose all sorts of different characteristics that you might care about related to your data, whether that's in what sort of region that storage provider is providing it, what their reputation is as demonstrated over the many other deals that they've taken in the network, whether or not they're going to offer you additional services like compute or retrieval or other related things. And so that's kind of like how Filecoin and IPFS fit in with each other, and also maybe how they fit in as compared to services like AWS, and then also other related cloud services like compute networks or CDN networks, which are the two kind of most exciting networks, I think, that are being built on top of Filecoin right now, so that you can bring those additional services to the data that you're already storing in Filecoin.
It's so interesting because people may not even be aware how much is actually being built on IPFS and how much the blockchain ecosystem does rely on it. So, Ethereum and Brave, even Microsoft and OpenSea are all leveraging that network. So it's pretty exciting what you guys are building. I'm curious, like, what your hot take is. Like, what would be your controversial opinion that people might disagree with you on in terms of like data permanence or storage or any of the, topics that you stay up at night thinking about?
Yeah. I know I guess from my vantage point, like, I think we should be creating, and maybe this is controversial, maybe not. Like, I think we should enable users, and like users should be the ones who hold the control in the system and should, decide, what they want related to their data. They should be able to check that what they care about is actually happening, and it really, like, we should scale all of the sets of things that a user might care about. So hopefully the vast majority of data that a user might care about, a lot of that's going to be open access data. And I actually think, like, there's a lot of data out there that we're happy to share the load around, and I would actually love to see like collective funding mechanisms for all of the data we care about. Like, wouldn't it be great if all of Wikipedia was just stored by all of the users of Wikipedia? I think there's both a crowdfunding of resources from the folks that already load and have a chunk of Wikipedia pages on them, but also people who care about and use Wikipedia. Maybe we would spend less time donating to Wikipedia for Wikipedia to store it, and we could just donate to its storage in the first place, donate our resources. But then we also have chunks of data that are private, where it's like, cool, I want to keep this data encrypted, end-to-end encrypted, no one else should be able to fetch this. Or like, yeah, this is data that like I kind of want access controls over, and I want to make sure literally no one else can fetch even the encrypted ciphertext of my data, because this is, and those are tiers, if you will, that I think that we should frame those from like an addition on top of how people think about like access tiers of like how fast you can load something. The privacy aspect is like another set of tiers that say Filecoin can provide to folks of like, great, you know, you have your public tier that's your cheapest option, and then you have your encrypted tier, which has a little bit of overhead in terms of helping you keep track of your encrypted blobs. And then you have like your encrypted and access controlled tier, which a number of groups are now providing with access controls at the storage provider level. And so I think all of that is an area that is now available, even with like decentralized networks with relatively low trust. We are now building up those different tiers in terms of privacy, in terms of access latency, and for each of these things, it's just per tier things cost more. Where it's like, great, here's your lowest. If you want to store like public, slow to retrieve data on Filecoin right now, it's practically free. Like you can store large scale Hadron Collider data, and that's a public good for the world that is like pretty low cost in Filecoin. Now, if you want to have encrypted data that you want to access very quickly and very often, that costs more, and that's just like an additional storage tier on top of things. And so I actually think the tiering model helps people think about decentralized storage and the overheads associated with things really nicely. Maybe like when thinking if I have any like, in 10 years, XYZ thing's going to be possible. Like I do have a hot take where I think it's a terrifying one, but exciting. Like I think it's possible to build self-perpetuating systems on something like, blockchains today, especially ones that can offload their storage, can pay for the aggregation of their data model, and that can load that data back in. I think it's actually possible today to build a self-perpetuating AI system on Filecoin that is using FVM for its compute steps, is using Filecoin storage where the contract pays for the storage of its data model, and it can add to it over time, and it can create bounties to load that data back on chain so it can do actions on top of it. That's already possible, and it's only going to get cheaper as we start having compute networks on Filecoin that run like literally. There was a testnet announced earlier today that does all sorts of like stable diffusion and other AI jobs on top of data stored in Filecoin. And so now you'll be able to, from that smart contract, execute your compute jobs and store the data back in Filecoin and run yourself forward. So crazy, a little bit scary, but also like, a new horizon in terms of, being able to like spin up and execute long running, AI refinement processes or generative AI tools in our world.
Are there any other, if Filecoin didn't exist and IPFS didn't exist, are there any other platforms that this self-perpetuating AI could or would use, or do you really feel like it's kind of part of this network?
I mean, I know of a number of blockchain networks that are kind of aiming to be AI focused. So I think like that's the point of Near, was to like have AI modules on the Near network, and not even just that could execute themselves, but could try to affect like real world systems in some way. I saw a talk from Ilya that was relating something about hands. You'd give your AI module on the Near blockchain hands. Filecoin definitely doesn't do that, to my understanding, but I think that there are probably some other Web3 systems, maybe Ethereum, where you could do this, but you'd have to fit all of your storage inside of Ethereum mainnet with Ethereum gas costs, which would be incredibly expensive. But the big innovation for Filecoin is like any process can pay for storage. Like it can be a group of processes, it can be a collection of individuals can collectively pay for the storage of data. And I think that's an incredibly powerful primitive that hopefully we see used for all sorts of really good collective outcomes, like us collectively storing Wikipedia archives and other useful data sets. But you can also use it for having a compute job store its output for itself instead of having to use a human credit card number in AWS or Ethereum, which at the end of the day needs to tie back to a single individual who's, holding on to that data. And if that individual goes away, like the data's gone and everyone relied on that person and it's not there anymore. And so you can now literally program systems that can, scale themselves, and as they create more economic output in the world, can fund their own expansion in these sorts of decentralized worlds, which I think is really powerful, and we've yet to see it, reach its potential.
So fascinating. And as you're, really innovating in your own role and the space in general, are there people or projects that are really inspiring you right now?
That's a great question. I'm constantly inspired by some of the badass people I work with. Like, Marta Belcher is the GC and head of the Filecoin Foundation, or leads the board of the Filecoin Foundation, and she's just fast, like so powerful, so capable, and I'm kind of constantly in awe of like her ability to find like amazing connection points at EFF, and is a huge resource from a policy perspective as groups are trying to iterate on US policy around how do we think about a network where you're doing data storage, and you have like a economy around the storage of data, and a market that is formed and is transacting around this kind of like utility. She's has all of this like outreach to groups that know nothing about Web3, and is helping kind of like educate, bring them in, enable, support, connect. And so she's an inspiration to me, because I love that like ability to empower and educate many, many others to learn more about this space. I'm also really inspired by kind of the founders across the Web3 space. We have this 200 plus organization Protocol Labs network. And so I get to work with a number of these founders who are building their companies and, scaling businesses and applications in Web3 that are, helping cross the chasm. And I think that's really, really where the success of our world is going to come from. It's, an example is this project called Mona that's building virtual worlds, building kind of like metaverse spaces, video game spaces, but like beautifully designed virtual worlds that you can roam around, you can place objects in them, you can hang out, you can add game mechanics to them, you can mint them as NFTs, you can put NFTs inside them. Like it's beautiful, and it's open in a way that like the metaverse systems that are being designed by other companies are like, very closed and very locked down. And so, having builders and creators in the Web3 space who are applying these kind of like open primitives and open composability to domains that can be really exciting, and like create a lot more collaboration and help the next layer of the internet be locked open as well. I think that's really exciting.
So amazing. This has been such an enlightening, interesting conversation. I'm curious, how can we keep in touch with the projects coming out of Protocol Labs, and also just you personally as you share and develop and grow in this space?
Awesome. I'm always happy to connect with folks on Twitter. That's one of the easy ways to reach me. I'm momac28, and I'm also on all of the Filecoin Slack, or hanging out in various different Telegram channels. I think I'm momac2 on Telegram. Happy to chat there. And then for all of these projects, like personally, what I love the most is meeting people at events. And so I know a lot of the Web3 community is gathering later this year in Istanbul. There's going to be a Zoo Connect. There's going to be Lab Week, which is right at the same time as Dev Connect. So a ton of us will be gathering together in person. There's like, I don't even know how many different events as part of Lab Week. I think something like 30 at this point, of different groups who are showcasing their work, having cool design discussions, talking about how we can take things to the next level. And so that's a great way to get in touch. If you Google Protocol Labs Lab Week, I'm sure you'll find the link. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but that's a great place to connect. And then, of course, anything related to kind of like, joining protocol.ai is the Protocol Labs website, IPFS.io is the IPFS website, Filecoin.io is the Filecoin website, and that has a lot of links for how to kind of join the community, get involved. Constantly excited to help welcome new community members, new developers, folks that want to get involved either as storage providers or storage clients, and help connect them to the right people to start utilizing this new Web3 foundation for our data.
So exciting. There's so many ways to get plugged in, and it's such a beautiful ecosystem that you're building. So thank you for all the amazing work that you're doing. This has been such a fun conversation, and we'll definitely be following along.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And excited to see what all of you guys built as well.
Thanks, Molly. Talk to you soon.